Hi, this is another tutorial on virtual production, and this one is about how to import the assets from my virtual production sample into your own project. So the first thing we need to do is prepare the target we want to import into. So I'm in the Unreal Virtual Studio project, which you can get off the Learn tab of the Unreal Launcher. And there's several different studio maps in here, as you can see. I'm going to turn on Studio D, which I've done recordings in before, but this is a clean copy of it. So there's nothing prepared. You can find a text version of how to do the migrate in the Virtual Studio project in GitHub. First thing you need to do is come up and get all the plugins that you're going to use turned on. If you don't do this, the project may actually crash when you migrate, or it might just not work quite right. You might find some things are not set up. So we got to make sure these are all set. In my case, I'm using an Aja media capture card, so that needs to be turned on right here. You may be using a different media capture device. You'll need to make sure it's turned on in the target project. Then we go to compositing. Need to make sure composure and lens distortion are enabled. And if we go down to media, we need to make sure media framework utilities and media IO framework are enabled. And under media player, you need to enable any players you might be using. Just for safety, I usually check Media Foundation and WMF Media Player. And under movie players, I check Windows Movie Player. And right down to the bottom, under virtual production, make sure virtual production utilities is checked. Now, while you're doing this, it's probably going to ask you each time you check something to restart Unreal. You can ignore that until we finish. The next step is a few engine settings that you need to do. So you go up to Edit, Project Settings, and the first one is in post-processing, so I'm just going to type post. And you see here, enable alpha channel support. That needs to be set like this is, linear color space only. And then the last thing you need to set is to make sure that there's an input in your project. If you may or may not have some action mappings and axis mappings. If you don't have any axis mappings, you need to just check the plus button here, and that'll create one. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. It just needs to have at least one exist. If you don't have this, probably your Vive trackers may not work quite right. So be sure to do this. And at this point, we're pretty much done here. So you can allow Unreal to restart, and then you can close the editor back up again. Now, when it's restarting, it may take a little while because it probably will have to rebuild all your shaders. So depending on how complex your map is, that can take some time. If you're worried about this, open up your task manager and take a look under Unreal. If you see a lot of tasks starting and stopping that are called something along the lines of shader compiler helper, then everything is working the way it should be. And eventually, if you leave it be, it'll get restarted and you'll be back in your project again. And then the next step will be to close that and go to my project that you're going to try and migrate from. So now we're back in my project, the virtual production sample, and now we need to prepare things for the migrate that we're going to do into the virtual studio. The main thing we need to do here is we need to just make a map that has only the things we want to migrate in it. So this is the way the project will look when you get it. If you've already done some migrations, there might be an empty studio map in here already. And you probably, if you've made any changes to the project, you want to get rid of that and start again. Before you do any of this migrating stuff, you probably want to make sure that everything in this project runs like it should. And you get a video that looks something like that. That'll make sure that everything is correctly running before you try and send it in all these resources into your own project. So now the first thing we want to do is make that empty studio I mentioned. So we're going to go in here and say I want to make a new level, and we'll name it Empty Studio. Now that you have that Empty Studio map created, you want to come over here in the World Outliner and select everything in the Comp Elements folder. If you actually want to migrate the third person character, that's the guy who's in the foreground, you can select him also, but normally I don't migrate him because there'll be some other foreground objects in the new map that you want to use instead. So you select all those guys and then hit copy. Then you change to the Empty Studio map and paste. And then save. And now we're actually ready to migrate. So you can click on and select the Empty Studio and control click and select Aja Genlock. Then come down to Asset Actions and choose Migrate. And you'll get a list like this. You want to take a quick look down it to make sure nothing that is exporting that isn't supposed to be. And this looks pretty good, so I go ahead. Now you've got a dialog asking you where you want to migrate to. So here I'm going to my Unreal Projects folder, Test Virtual Studio in the Content folder. If you want to put this at another level down inside here, you can, but I'm just going to put it right into the Content folder. So I'm going to press Select Folder, and the export happens. You may see some error messages show up. Usually this is related to source control. If source control isn't set up, you might want to look at these messages and just see if there's anything that looks scary in there, but odds are it'll be fine. All right, now I'm back in my target project, the Unreal Virtual Studio project, and I've selected Studio D. This is one I've filmed in before. And then the first thing we need to do is we go to the VP Stuff folder, which should have come over during the migrate. Select the Empty Studio and go into it. Then select all these elements here and do a copy. And we need to go back to Studio D. And we're going to do a paste. Now, as you can see, all the elements have come through. You may get this extra folder called Comp. You can delete that. Now you want to take the talent marker object, this one, and move it to wherever you want the talent to be standing in this level. So I'm just going to move him over this way. So that he's right in front of the windows. And then lower him down till he's right on the floor. Now I want to go up into Project Settings, Maps and Modes, set the game instance to globals, and then we go into Engine, General. We go down to the settings that control frame rate, and we set the Aja Genlock and apply it. And now we have to restart the program. And go back into Studio D. And now we're all set. All we have to do is press play. And you should see our man. You can see the focus target that's coming from my live camera. Everything is neatly composited together. It's possible you might have to make some minor adjustments to get everything to look right, depending on your project. There can be problems if things in the migrate have the same names as things already in your project. Some types of lighting and auto exposure may need to be adjusted to get everything to look correct. And if you've changed the talent marker from the mannequin that you see here to something else, you may need to reset the comp camera rig's focus target to make sure that it's in focus. That's about it.